Today, very delighted to have Dr. Loukas Balafoutas from University of Innsbruck. So we had worked on one paper, probably as well. So Loukas is an assistant professor at the Department of Public Finance, University of Innsbruck, and his research in behavioral economics. He looks at economies, labor market, and public goods, importance of social norms, and he usually uses experimental methods in the field and in the lab. So today he's going to talk about punishment. And we have some students who suffer from my punishment. Okay, please.
Thank you, and thanks a lot for inviting me. It's really nice to be here. Okay, so I'm gonna begin straight away since we don't have that much time. So what I'm gonna talk to you about today is indeed something on punishment and social norms. Let me say it's joint work with Nikos, who's now moving to NYU in Abu Dhabi. So he's gonna be a neighbor of yours soon, and Bettina Rockenbach from Cologne. And this is I'm quite happy to be presenting this because it's the first time I'm doing it, and Nikos is also presenting it one of these days in Abu Dhabi, so it's kind of the premiere for this work. And I'm quite excited to hear from you, to get your feedback, your ideas. So this is a study on social norms in general, and I think we all have an idea of what social norms are. They are rules of behavior that tell us what we should and should not do. For example, when very often we have to stand in line for something, or the way we dress is governed by norms. The way we behave in many situations, like we know we're not supposed to litter. It's not constant across all countries, but these are some general norms. And of course, there is a very wide range of circumstances where there are well-established rules of what we should and should not do. And it's a good thing to have norms because they can help people coordinate and have a harmonic social interaction, let's say. So for example, I mentioned the norm of queuing as my first example. So this is what a nice queue looks like. It helps people coordinate and have a sequence in getting the good or service that they're looking for. If you fail to coordinate, things can go wrong, and you can have something like that, right? And you don't want that because at the end of the day, it's bad for everybody. So, I don't think I need to convince you more that norms, respecting norms, is a good thing. Now, one interesting thing about social norms is that they don't, exist on their own, but they depend on the willingness of people to adhere to them, to respect them. So as soon as we stop respecting a norm, the norm does not exist anymore. And the question is, what is it that makes people respect norms? One reason is that, and that's the reason that I want to focus on today, is that people can be punished if they don't respect the norm. So in this example, if someone tries to jump the queue, someone else might say, hey, what are you doing? Go back to your place. This is the kind of punishment I'm talking about, that someone violates a norm and another person tells them that they should not behave like that. There are other reasons, of course, why people respect norms, such as what we call norm internalization. That's the idea that you do care about the norm yourself, right? When I throw something on the floor, I might be worried that you would tell me to pick it up, but I might also feel bad because I care about the cleanliness or the environment. That's what we mean by internalization. And then you can have other things like you care about your reputation, or some norms are supported by law, and that's another reason for respecting them. But today I'm going to talk about punishment. So punishment can be a good thing, can be beneficial for the person who undertakes it if they meet with someone repeatedly, right? So if I see that Mongol keeps throwing stuff on the floor, I would tell him to stop because I know that in the future he will behave nicely. But what's interesting for this talk is that most of our interactions, especially in big cities, right, are with strangers. So with people we never see again. And so that's one thing to keep in mind. And another thing to remember is that if you punish someone, at least in expectation, it's costly because that person can hit back, right? I tell someone to pick up their trash and they punch me in the face. It can happen. So given that punishment is costly, the question is, why do people do it? And some explanations that have been suggested in the literature are, well, there is some evidence from neuroeconomics, so people having brain scans, that people enjoy punishing, right? So this experiment had like people punish freeriders, and then they would see that certain zones in the parts of the brain were activated that were associated with feeling some kind of reward. What I'm more interested in today are the second and the third reason, which are very related. The second bullet point says that if you don't punish someone who violates a norm, you're sending a signal out there that you don't care about the norm yourself. So there's a meta-norm, in the words of this guy, Axelrod, that you should enforce other norms, right? So if Mongolzin throws something and I don't say anything about that, then Martin could come and say, hey, what are you doing? Why are you not reacting? That's this kind of story. And then you could also think in the same way that if someone sees me punish Mongolzin, they would say, well done, serves him right. And that would give me some kind of a direct benefit, or even indirectly through an increased social status, which would make me happier and so on, right? So this is what I want to talk about today. What we did was we ran an experiment to investigate these mechanisms. There is very little evidence on that in economics and in the social sciences in general. Just a couple of lab experiments, nothing from the field. And also, everything that I have seen is with repeated interactions and not with strangers. And finally, even that evidence is quite mixed. So sometimes punishment seems to be rewarded and sometimes not. So it's pretty much an open question. Now, before I move on to some more details, as an aside, I was talking about punishment, and I want to make a distinction between two kinds of punishment. One is what I'll call direct punishment. It means that I just tell someone to stop doing what they're doing and behave nicely. So I would tell Mongolzin, pick up your trash. Sorry for using that example. And an indirect punishment would be withholding rewards. So 1 minute later or 1 month later, I don't care, Mongolzin comes up to me and needs my help, and I'm not offering my help because I want to punish him by not helping him when he needs me. Right? That's what I mean by indirect punishment here, withholding rewards. Again, on the interaction between direct and indirect punishment, the evidence from lab experiments is quite mixed. So sometimes they seem to be complements in the sense that they work together. And there's also evidence from a paper by my co-author where they seem to be substitutes, right? So if I can punish him by not helping, I would rather do that. So that's also an open question, and that's also something we wanted to investigate. So after this introduction, here's what we were interested in, and these are the research questions I'll be trying to answer to some extent today. The first question is direct punishment rewarded in one-shot interaction? So if I punish someone who does something bad, does it help me or does it not help me? Do I get some benefit because people think I'm a cool guy for doing it and I'm a very social guy? Or do people think I'm just self-righteous and I should just leave him alone and not speak, right? It could be either. A second question is, do we find evidence from the field for this use of withholding rewards as a means of punishment? And we were also interested in this interaction between direct and indirect punishment. So withholding rewards versus just explicitly saying something. Right, and we did that using a natural field experiment. I mean, I suppose many of you are familiar with field experiments. The idea is that instead of having people in the lab, you just go out in the field and try to enact a situation and observe people in their natural environment, right? So they don't know that an experiment is taking place. And this has advantages. For example, it has a real social context. It has well-established social norms that we're studying, which is usually not the case in the lab, where people are often presented with unfamiliar situations. Of course, there are also issues with that. You don't have so much experimental control, but it's a methodology that's generally gaining ground in the social sciences. And of course, there are, what I mean here when I say there are real costs of punishment is that if you try to do something like that in the field, punishment can be pretty harsh. So someone could actually get mad and punch you. And it didn't happen, but it could have happened. Now, what we did in this experiment is quite similar in terms of method to a previous work by me and Nikos, and I just very briefly, 1 minute, want to tell you what we did in our first paper. So we just went to Athens, Greece, and looked for punishment, right? So what we did was we violated social norms, and we wanted to see whether people would say something, right? Because from the lab, we know that people actually click on that button that says, you know, punish the other person by taking some money. But we wanted to see whether people would actually say something when we throw litter, right? So we violated 2 social norms. The one was escalators, so we stood on the left side of escalators, blocking everything. That's quite annoying. You probably know that from airports and subway stations. And the other thing is, we went to the subway station in central Athens and did that. And the other thing is we just threw plastic bottles on the ground. We did that with men, women, and tall and short guys, but that's not very important here. Let me just show you the average, the main results. So with the escalators norm, 1/5 of the time people were willing to say something and just tell us to step aside so they could pass by. With littering, which is the more annoying violation because you actually throw a plastic bottle in a very clean place, which is the subway of Athens, people almost never said anything. So the rate of punishment was 4%. And that's kind of interesting. I mean, the explanation we have for that is that people are quite worried about counter-punishment. So if you see someone who is throwing a plastic bottle in a very clean place, you probably think, this guy is crazy. I don't want to talk to him and tell him to pick it up because he might actually kick me. Okay? But this is just to let you know that we used a similar method to that, but now we're not looking for punishment. We're looking for the effects of punishment on, you know, on your social status, let's say, on whether you get some benefit from it. Now let me get back to what we did now. We had an experiment, we did our field experiment in Germany, in Cologne, and that was in May 2013, so a few months ago. And we had 22 different platforms in 2 of the stations of Cologne. Here is called Messe Deutsch, and this one is the main train station of Cologne. So what we did was the following. We had 4 groups of research assistants, and each group consisted of 3 persons. 2 persons were doing some stuff that I'll talk about in a couple of slides. So they were simulating a norm violation. They were, well, throwing stuff on the platform, and another person could come and say, hey, what are you doing? Pick it up. So we had this entire social interaction of norm violations and punishment. And we had 1 supervisor per group who was just supposed to make sure that they're doing everything right, was monitoring whether everything was clean, was cleanly done, and had to decide whether an observation is valid or not. So this was kind of the boss of the group. And we had male and female groups who wanted to see whether gender plays a role. It does. I'll talk about that later. The supervisors were PhD students of my colleague from Cologne, and the assistants were drama students. The idea was, well, I mean, I don't know if we really needed that, but since we had to have people interact, and we might want to expand on this design in the future with even more rich social interaction, we just hired drama students who would not feel embarrassed doing stuff in front of people, I guess. That was the idea. Yes, that's part of the team. That's me. That guy there is Nikos. And Bettina is the one taking the picture, so you cannot see her. But these are our supervisors. Some of them. Right, so let me get back to, well, let me get to the details, right? Because so far I haven't given you any details of the design. So here's exactly what we did and our treatments. So the first treatment is called base help. This is just this was meant to give us an idea of how willing people are to help others in general when they need something. What was it that they needed? Well, we had one of our assistants just go close to an observer, someone waiting for the train, and they were carrying a bag full of books, and they accidentally dropped them. You'll see a video in a bit of how that worked, right? So they accidentally dropped their books, and we wanted to measure whether people would offer to help, right? They would they would actually help by picking up books, or at least they would ask, can I help you? So we measured the help rate by observers to have a baseline of people's willingness to help others. In our base punishment treatment, we wanted to see whether we wanted to have a baseline measure of whether, do people punish norm violators? That's the same thing as in Athens, right? We had a person who dropped, what was it? It was a McDonald's cup on the platform. And then we measured what we call direct punishment rate. So someone going and saying, hey, what are you doing? Pick it up. Or do you do this at home? Or, oh, sir, you dropped that. You know, there are different ways that you can actually tell someone to pick something up. You can be polite. You can tell them they're a pig. You can do different things. But all of these we counted as norm enforcement because you actually let that person know they have to pick it up. Okay, and now comes the richer interaction. So we have this treatment that's called help violator. So that guy again dropped the cup. And then the same person went close to the unsuspecting passenger and dropped the books. And we wanted to measure two things. Well, do they help that person? Remember now, this person is not just any person. It's a guy who just threw a plastic cup. So you might be pretty annoyed and not willing to help them. So we measured the help rates, and we also measured whether they punish them directly by saying something, right? So they could actually help with the books and say, by the way, you're a pig. So we did that. And in the final treatment, we have the following scenario. A person throws the plastic cup. That's the littering. That we call that person the violator, right? Then we have punishment. So another of our assistants goes and says, you know, would you please pick this up? The platform is not a trash can. And then that person who was the nice guy and actually enforced the norm would drop the books next to the unsuspecting passengers, and we wanted to see whether they would help that guy. Remember, this is the nice guy, or you could think that this is the bad guy because you shouldn't be telling people what to do. That's open to well, we'll see about that in a minute. Yes?
Pick it up then or not?
Yes, they always picked it up.
Okay, so they followed the...
Yes, so thanks for asking. Yes, so I throw the cup, you come and tell me to pick it up, I pick it up and leave the scene, and then you stay in the scene and you drop your books. And it worked like that. So this is not a real observation. That's three of our assistants, that guy, the lady, and someone else, who were simulating what they actually did in reality. Because you cannot really film others, you can get into trouble. Anyway, oops, this doesn't work somehow. Oh, it does. Right, so that's what we did pretty much. By the way, these guys had to train for a while with the dropping of the books, right? Because you can't really throw the books. You have to make it look like it's really an accident. And they also train a lot dropping the cup. Because, again, it's not easy, you know? Because if you really throw it as if you're in a sporting competition, it's pretty obvious. So, I mean, whenever an observation was not done correctly, we excluded it from the sample. Like if you throw the books on the other person's feet, it doesn't count because you're kind of forcing them to do something. We try to throw them close to them, but not too close. Right, any questions so far on the design?
So what happened in that? The person asked whether I can help you? And
Oh yes, sorry, that was not heard well. So this guy here on the right is the person throwing the cup, and the other person came and said, "Oh, you mean at the end what happened?" Yes, she asked if he needs help, and he said no, it's fine. But that counts as offering, right? Anything else?
small thing, you say punishment, but actually it's enforcement, non-enforcement. Sometimes you
Yes,
say semantics.
I should have clarified. I use them interchangeably. It's the same thing. So if you punish, you enforce the norm by punishing. Well, it's punishment if you think that the other person is actually suffering a cost because you made him pick it up and you kind of told them that what they're doing is wrong. If they actually don't care at all about what you're saying, then it's not punishment. But it's still norm enforcement because you made them pick it up. So, no, I agree with you. Norm enforcement is the more proper word for this one. But this kind of relates to all of the lab literature on punishment in public goods games where you actually punish by causing monetary losses to the other person. So in all of the literature we use these two terms are used as one. But you're right, it's more norm enforcement. Yes?
This requires the third person to be around witnessing all of this. So do you have instances where people walked off after the cup was thrown?
Yes, but these were not then included in the sample. That was the job of the supervisor. Also, it could be the case that, we always targeted people who were alone because otherwise you have a coordination problem. If it's two of us, then punishment is also a kind of a second order public good because, we have to coordinate on who does it, right? So in some cases, someone else could join the scene, then we again aborted the observation. So we're only looking for cases where it's two of our people and one passenger. Okay. So, we could not exactly equalize the number of observations by treatment exactly because of what you're saying. We had to drop some observations where things went wrong. So in the end, our target was to have at least 100 per treatment, and we made that. So that was okay. So that's a total of 150 observations, more or less. What we recorded was always, the time and location of that situation, the gender, and more or less the age of the observer. That's the passenger, remember? What he was doing or she was doing while standing. They could be reading or listening to music or something. The number of bystanders, the reaction of the observer to the violation, or the dropping of books. That's exactly our outcome. So we tried to document every observation as well as we could. And we also ran a general public survey with a different population, right? So we went to different people on the platform, even on different days, and just asked them in general hypothetical situations about what they would do in such a situation. And I might get to talking about that quite very briefly, but we did that to get some insights on people's motivation. Right, so let me get to the results. And this graph will show you the helping rates by treatment. Right, so this is what percent of the passengers, of the observers, helped our people pick up the books. This is the baseline help. This is, remember, no violation, no punishment, just someone dropping the books, and about 40% of people help. 39 point something. I don't know if you think that's a lot or not. I was glad that it's not a corner at 0 or 100. It's an intermediate value. It is what it is. But that gives us a benchmark of willingness to help. Now let's see what happens if you drop a plastic cup. Do you get punished by people not helping you? Yes. So people who dropped the cup did not get help with the books when they needed it, right? The rate here is, I think, 19%. We'll see that on the next slide. So that's, you see standard errors here. So that difference is quite strong, right? we were quite happy to get that difference. And perhaps the most, well, why we started the project actually was this bar that I'm going to show you now. We wanted to see whether that person who enforces the norm gets a benefit in their future interaction with others. And the answer is, well, no, they don't. Which, you know, I'm not sure if I like this result, but again, it is what it is. So these are the people who actually told the violator to pick up their plastic cup, and they get helped a little bit more, that's 44%, but that's not significantly higher than the control treatment. So do participants use indirect punishment? So do they strategically help some people and not help others because they think they are not respecting a norm? Yes, right? We're talking about the difference of, well, that's more than double, 39 over 19%, highly significant. So we find clear evidence on, from the field for withholding rewards as a means of punishment. Are punishers rewarded? No. Well, I mean, the help rates are a bit higher. They go up by almost 5 percentage points, but the difference is clearly not significant. So we cannot claim to have found any significant effect here, but this is an important non-result, right? It says that people who punish others do not enjoy a benefit. They probably do not get a higher social score that they can count on in the future.
You actually somewhere along the lines you told us that you might get punished because you're self-righteous and so on and so forth. People might think, why are you being so self-righteous about these
Yes.
things? So when you could interpret it slightly differently and say, well, actually they don't get punished and they might not get much of a reward, but they also don't get any punishment.
Yes, so that's a more positive way of looking at it. Well, the thing is the following. I mean, if we care about enforcing social norms, and well, they're a good thing, right? And cooperation in general is a good thing. So punishment is a mechanism that is shown to generally sustain social norms. So you want people to be willing to punish free riders. So a more positive result would be if these guys were actually getting a lot of help, right? Because this would mean that this would be a more. That's why I'm seeing it as a partial failure of. You know, it's not a failure, but it's. This still does not explain. Let me put it differently. We do see that some people are willing to punish norm violators, and we thought that maybe it's because they get a reward from that, but they don't. So the puzzle remains of why do people punish. That's kind of the big picture.
If it's not punishment, if it's enforcing the norm, then they're just enforcing the norm. They're doing nothing extra, right?
You mean that they care about the norm, so that's enough for them?
They just care about the norm, so the enforcement there, that's it. There's no benefit, but at the same time.
Well, there is a benefit if you care about the norm, but.
Yeah, but at the same time, you know, your result is showing these two are identical, right? Or at least we cannot differentiate. So.
No, exactly. But if we had found a difference, then we would be able to say that's the explanation. Exactly. Now I cannot. But we were trying to find a benefit there, and I'm reporting that we didn't. Right. So that doesn't seem to be driving the willingness to punish. Yes.
But so this setting is like one-time gain.
Yes.
But didn't you like think about whether if you do it, someone develops a reputation of enforcing norms, might get more benefits?
Oh, that's a great question. No, we didn't do it. I have no great ideas about how to do that with a field experiment. I mean, there are ways of doing it in the lab. You put people in groups behind a computer and you let them interact, and then you have a group member number, and you see participant number 3 is being nice, so let's reward them. But in the field, it's kind of tricky. But yes, it's a very good question. We haven't done that. It's all one shot. Yes. Yeah.
Are the violator and the punisher the same guy?
Sorry, say that again.
Are the violator and the punisher are the same person?
Are the same? No. It's a different person.
No, I understand. Like in your video, you show this the other guy is the punisher, but you have another setup is for the violator, right?
Yes.
So my question is, this difference in the violator is the guy who is the punisher at the other side.
Wait, I'm not sure if I get that right, but what I should have said maybe is that they kept changing roles.
No, I'm thinking is because say with the punisher, that's it, right? The violator is the kid, right? It's younger. And in that sense, you observe is if the punisher can help, right? So, but for
No, we observe whether another person helps.
the punisher, he dropped the books.
Yes.
And you observe if he can help.
Yes.
But another thing is that another scenario is that only the violator, right? The violator drop the books.
Yes.
See if he can help.
Mm-hmm.
So my question is, in this scenario, is the violator is the same guy as the older guy in another?
No, as I said, we kept changing. So in one scenario, you might be the punisher, and then we'd get together and say, next time you'll be the violator and I'll be the punisher. So we had people change roles all the time, right? I'm not sure if that answers your question, but I can also clarify that afterwards. Okay. Anything else? Yeah.
Was there consistency among the punishments that the actors used, or did they?
It was a fixed scenario. Yeah, they had to say the exact words of, would you please pick this up? The platform is not a trash can. Yeah.
You see how the effects might differ based on the characteristics of the observer?
Yes. I'll show you, well, I could show you, you might see a regression later, but men and women do not punish differently. Although in Athens we had found that men are a bit more willing to punish, but Germany and Greece are two different countries. So, and I'll get to that in the next slide. But, so the gender doesn't seem to matter. What seems to matter is age, and I think older people are a bit less likely to help. It's probably a bit more costly for them to help. But, so all we have found is a small effect of age, and other than that, we didn't find an effect.
You mentioned age, you asked the...
No. An approximate estimate, like age brackets. We did not ask because we wanted them to be unsuspecting, right? Yes.
What about if they're a local or a foreigner?
We couldn't really code that because...
I was wondering whether someone would approach them and just talk to them and maybe when they exit.
Yes. No, actually, we were thinking about simulating that, like having one of the people speak in an accent. But, there's so many things you can do, and then you have to pick your treatments. And with observers, we don't know because we didn't want to be subjective and say this guy looks local or not. It would be a bit subjective. Okay, so let's look at punishment rates. This here is the baseline punishment rate. So you just have that person dropping a cup, and the question is, how much punishment is there? It's 17%. Now remember, in Greece it was 4%, right? Just as an aside. So people seem to punish more in Germany. Martin, that makes sense, right? Well, yes, but you live in Germany. And now what's interesting is in this other treatment, help violator, here, this person who dropped the cup then needs your help, right? So what we see here is a clear move, is a clear shift. Well, you will see the shift to indirect punishment in a bit, but what's happening here is that there seems to be a substitution, right? Whenever you get the chance to punish in a different way by not helping, the direct punishment rate goes down a lot. So there seems to be some crowding out, right? Whenever people have the chance to use indirect punishment to not help, they prefer to do that rather than directly go and say, pick it up. So the difference is 17 to 7%. It's clearly significant. Right, so remember what we have. One thing we found is that that direct punishment is not rewarded. So if I tell people if I enforce the norm, I don't get a benefit from that. And also, from the surveys, we see that people are generally afraid, right? So we asked people, would you tell that person to pick it up in a hypothetical situation? Most of them said no. And the most common reason, so we asked them why not, and the most common reason they gave was, I'm afraid there might be some kind of tension. That's the way the question was framed. So you're afraid that if you punish someone, he might punch you, in free translation, and by punishment you don't get any help, any reward. So it makes sense that you're not, that whenever you have the chance to substitute with indirect punishment, you do it, right? So all I'm saying is that the whole pattern makes sense. Given the whole pattern, it makes sense that people prefer to withhold rewards rather than punish directly. So one thing that I think is very interesting and quite funny is this graph. That's men and women, right? When I say men and women, I am talking about the gender of our people, right? The assistants who were playing the whole game. So let's look at direct punishment. This is, remember, where we got a total of an average of 17% across men and women, but that's almost entirely women. Okay? So people in this experiment are much more likely to go and tell a woman to pick her cup up, but they don't do that with a man. You might ask yourselves why. I mean, for me, it's pretty clear. I think you all think the same. They're a bit more afraid, right? You see a woman, you think, she's less likely to punch me, so I'll go tell her. With men, so this is 26 compared to 6%. The difference is huge. So they can't punish men because they're afraid. So what do they do with men? Well, when they have the chance, they punish them indirectly. So you see there's a big reversal. Indirect punishment here is defined as the baseline help rate minus the help rate that the violator gets. I hope it's clear, but believe me, this is a decent measure of indirect punishment. Yes?
It should add up to, then you add something more, it should add up to 100, right? So if one is larger, the other has to go down as well.
Are you talking about this one?
Yeah.
No, this one is, okay. So if you look at the help rates, the difference, so the baseline help is 40%, and the violators get 19%, so the difference is 21. And you can see that the average between those two is around 21, right? So that's the difference between what you would normally get in the baseline minus what you actually get as a violator. And that's indirect punishment. Yes?
Did it matter the gender of the observer in that?
Not really. I was very surprised that it did not. I was pretty sure that it would, but it doesn't. Like, you would think that with help, so one thing that can be going on here is, as I said, that with men you're a bit worried that they might react, with women you're not, and so you're more likely to use your indirect punishment with men. You're thinking, I'm not helping you. Another thing that could be going on is that there is a norm of helping women more than there is a norm of helping men, right? So that could be one reason why women do not get much indirect punishment. So even if you don't like what they did, you'll help pick up the books. Right, so what we see is that people in Germany punish women, not Germans, people in Germany punish women directly much more often than men, but they also help them much more often, right? So summing up this pattern here, I can say that roughly speaking, men are getting punished indirectly, as you see here, whereas women get punished directly. So that was a pattern that was quite cute, I thought. I guess we don't have time for that. These are regressions of the help. Just very quickly, this is the help outcome. That's a dummy variable, and you see that the violator gets a lot, 25% less help. These are marginal effects. And men also get much less help than women. You also see that age, so older people help less. that answers your question. And then we have a similar thing on direct punishment, and again you see that the violators get a lot less direct punishment. Why? Well, because you punish these people by not helping them, right? There's this substitution effect that we have found. And I have 5 minutes, so let me just give you an idea of what we did in the surveys. A total of 293 surveys among the general population of the platforms. We asked them, so we described them as a situation with someone dropping a cup, and in some surveys also someone else coming and telling them to pick it up. And we asked them about, well, how much would it bother you that someone throws the cup, whether you would say something, whether they would help the person who dropped the books, and so on. Now, there are a few things with the surveys, but what I think is kind of interesting is that we do find a reasonably strong correlation between the social acceptability of behavior, I'll explain what that is, and help outcomes. So, in other words, when we asked people how socially acceptable do you think the action of someone dropping a cup is, this got really negative scores. And the social acceptability of someone punishing that person actually got high positive scores. So it seems to be that people are not perceived as self-righteous, but as, it's a good thing that you did it. And we find a very strong correlation. We find a strong correlation between this social acceptability and help rates. So this kind of points to the direction that people who punish should get more help, but we didn't see that in the data, right? The surveys seem to suggest that there is some kind of social benefit to punishment, but our raw data did not show this. So I'm just putting it out there. Yes?
So these surveys are among people at the train station?
People on the train station, yes, but not the same. Right. So we went to different platforms, and then maybe the same platforms on a different day. So that's all I had to say about surveys. And summing up, as I said, one standing puzzle in the social sciences is, why do people punish each other and punish norm violators and free riders in a cooperation context when they're strangers, when there's no reputation effect or repeated interaction. And one very often cited reason for that is, punishment could be rewarded by society. We don't find that, right? We find no evidence of a punishment premium. And since there is no evidence of a punishment premium, why should I do it? So whenever I can do something else, like hold it and just not help you whenever you need my help, I prefer to do that, right? So people prefer to use indirect punishment. So I would think like this, you know what? I saw what you did. I'm not going to say anything because what's it going to bring me? But if you ever need me, haha. Okay? That's kind of a repeated story that I said, but still, that's the message that we're putting forward. Small minority of people still use direct punishment even when they can punish indirectly. So there's crowding out, but it's not complete. And of course, as you said, there are other reasons too, right? They can enjoy the act, or they can really care about the norm. So there are different reasons for that. Yes?
They don't know that they'll get a chance of indirect punishment afterwards, right?
In this experiment, they kind of do. That's a good question, and not very easy for me to answer, because we wanted them to know that. So whenever that person threw the cup, after 1 or 2 seconds, he also threw the books, right? So we wanted to do it almost simultaneously. So then you're looking at me and you're thinking, I have both options open, right? Okay, thank you.